Hi, welcome or welcome back. I think you may notice, or you might not, but in my previous video, the last footage, I was actually wearing this clothes and possibly with this hairstyle because I recorded that one just minutes before I record this. So yeah, that bit of information is probably not going to be like really interesting or anything, so I'm just gonna skip ahead and talk about what I want to talk about in this video. And this one is DNF Diary, where I'll be talking about books that I did not finish, and I DNF 2 books, and both of these books are quite popular. And yeah, let's check them out. I'm sure you already know what books those are. It's already in the title, I think. So the first one that I DNF was this one. This is Call Me By Your Name by André, Aciman. And so this was actually something that I just kind of want to try because it was so popular, or I saw it everywhere, and so I just sort of decided to read it, and I actually started reading this book as a buddy read with Jyotsna from Jyotsna's Bookscapades. But because I DNF this book, because of what I thought about this book, I just had to like ditch Jyotsna and ditch our buddy reading altogether. She finished it, by the way, but yeah, it was just not for me. Now, let me just first tell you guys that I've never seen the movie, and apparently the movie is kind of like quite well loved by so many people, so I can't comment anything about the movie. But the book, though, well, before that, I'm just gonna tell you what this book roughly is about, I think, because I did not finish. So this is what I think it's about. It's about this guy who lives in Italy. His name is Elio, and he's 17 years old. And one summer, there's this American guy, a hot one, I think. I mean, he thinks this guy is hot. And this guy, his name is Oliver. He's a bit older. He's in his 20s. He comes to his house and stays there because this guy is a student or something. I don't really remember. But what happens is Elio just falls in love with this guy, and this guy Oliver sort of reciprocates their relationship. But then I DNF, so I'm not sure what happens with their relationship afterwards. Okay. It probably sounds like something that, shouldn't be a big problem for me to read. The premise sounds kind of interesting. It sounds kind of simple and probably relaxing. Something that is typical of a romance plot, or something with a romantic element in it. And I've always, I can't say I'm always on the lookout, but I would say I am quite interested in reading books that have romantic elements in them, because I do need those books sometimes. Anyway, I was sort of expecting something like that. I was expecting something that is very romantic while reading this book, but I found that the voice. Now, this book was narrated by Elio, the protagonist, so it's kind of like coming from first-person narration, and the narrator's voice is just so grating. Oh my gosh, it's so annoying in the sense that at first you kind of understand that this protagonist is a 17-year-old person. Now, before this, I used to be quite unforgiving when it comes to teenage narrator, or teenagers narrating a book, because teenagers are usually kind of dumb. I mean, I would know. And so they tend to say all those they say the darndest things. And sometimes you just kind of cringe when you read what they say. Sometimes you just feel all those secondhand embarrassment. Sometimes it just reminds you of yourself when you were at that age, and it's not pleasant. But I sort of realized that maybe I should approach it kind of differently, because when you were younger, you were like sort of like that too. Everything was just kind of like, wow, bombastic, oh my gosh, big. And it's appropriate for teenage narrators to express that kind of worldview. And you shouldn't be, it shouldn't feel too cringy to you, because that's kind of like normal. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna be more forgiving. I'm gonna be more lenient. So yeah, first of all, in this book, the teenage narrator definitely feels like, his attraction to Oliver, this guy, is definitely like one of the most important things that has ever happened in his life. Like, he feels very strongly about this attraction. He feels like Oliver is like the hottest person on earth at that time, and he is trying to tell me, the reader, that Oliver is just like this male god on earth. And I'm like, okay, you sound like a teenager, okay, go ahead. But then it seems like that's all he's trying to tell me. I kind of like it when someone tells me that they like a person. They're talking about someone they like. Maybe they're telling me about their crush, or their boyfriends or girlfriends or whatnot, and just pretty much gushing about how pretty they are, how awesome they are. And I would say I like hearing someone telling me that, and that would include book narrators when they tell me that they have this thing in their life, their happy time. But what I don't really like is that if that person keeps on telling me every single detail about that person, even the tiniest things that makes that person hot, sometimes I would lose interest, because I would find that I no longer share that kind of, affinity, or I no longer share what that person is feeling towards that person, towards their beloved, because they focus on things that are so minute that it just feels like too much, too overwhelming. And that's what happens in the first few pages of this book. I DNF somewhere in the 40 plus pages mark, which is actually quite early in this book. Maybe you would say that I didn't give it enough chance, but I thought that, he babbles so much about Oliver, and I don't know what happens with their relationship afterwards, but I think maybe you should focus on yourself. Maybe you should focus on something else instead of talking about him all the time, literally every single page. I'm tired of listening about this guy, and I don't think that this guy is that hot anymore. So, and yeah, this guy, this protagonist also sounds kind of pretentious. But then again, I chalk that up to the fact that this protagonist is a 17-year-old, and when we were 17-year-old, we were sort of pretentious, or maybe that's just me. But yeah, the voice was somewhat pretentious. But most of all, I just got tired of hearing too much about how hot his beloved is. So yeah, that's my complaint about this book. So I was kind of like, okay. So the next one, I actually DNF this book a bit further I actually went beyond the 50% mark. So this is Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle. So this is actually my first Philip K. Dick, but now that it's a DNF, I don't really consider that I've read any of his book. I mean, officially speaking. The Man in the High Castle is kind of interesting because it has this, I would say, wonderful premise. Basically, the story takes place somewhere or sometime. It's kind of like in an alternate world where the Axis power won the Second World War. So now what we know in our world as the United States is actually being controlled by the German and also the Japanese. And there's also this kind of like a buffer zone between those two regions, and at the same time, German and the German power and Japanese power, they're kind of like the dominant power in the world already. So, yep, this is kind of like an alternate history book, which is interesting in itself. So what happens in here, we have like a cast of characters, a bunch of people, and that's important. A bunch of people. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, or I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, I'm not going to make you confused. I'm just going to say a bunch of people in this book, they would eventually have a book in their hands, and this book, I think it's called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. And in this book, it presents a totally different scenario in which the Allied power wins the Second World War. So this novel, which is a novel inside this novel, reimagines how the world would look like. And apparently this novel is considered as controversial within this alternate universe. So yeah, it's kind of like that. And I suppose one of the mysteries in this book is kind of like, who wrote that novel? Who the hell is that writer? And I suppose they're going to figure out who that writer is. I'm not sure. And that's the thing, because while I was reading this book, I just now said a bunch of characters, and that's because I can't really remember who is in this book. I mean, we know that there is someone who deals antiques. We have a person who makes jewelry or something. I honestly can't remember very well who the people are in this book unless I actually write the names of the characters down and actually, list them out and write what they do and what happens to them and stuff. Because there's so many characters, you can sort of say that this book has an ensemble cast of characters, ensemble cast of protagonists. But the problem is that all those people, they feel the same. You don't feel like they have distinctive personalities. I think the author tries to do that, but somehow when it, when you read it, it just doesn't feel like you have this distinct people in the book. And it feels very confusing. It feels like you need to keep track of so many names, and honestly, it's taxing. And it makes this book feel kind of dry, and all the intrigues that could possibly come from the plot line just feels like, the flavor just goes away. So I think the main issue that I have with this book is that it devotes a lot of energy on world building. I can definitely see how detailed it goes into showing us how this world, this alternate world, look like to us. There's definitely a lot of effort being put on that end, that I think the characterization of the characters in this book just feels like a secondary thing, that the characters just don't feel real. They don't feel like actual people that I should care about. When I was reading this book, I'm not sure who is the person I should be following. Maybe I should follow all of these people, but then again, it feels like this book is really stretching all of my focus. Which character should I focus on? Which character should I sympathize more with? Honestly, I'm not really sure. I felt really confused because everyone just felt kind of equally, equally worthy of my sympathy. And at the same time, they also feel like they are all equally not exactly worthy of my sympathy. So, I don't know. That's what I felt about this book. I actually wanted to finish this book, but it just felt so uninteresting by the time I reached the halfway point that I just sort of decided to give up and stop. Anyway, let me know in the comments what have I missed by DNFing this book, these books, and let me know what you think about these books. Maybe you love them. Tell me what you love about these books. I would love to know as well. Or maybe you have the same thoughts as I. So let me know about that as well. Or if you have nothing to say, you can just say some random things. I don't know. If you want. Whatever. Like and subscribe. Anyway, I'll see you again in a different video. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching. And bye.